All right, and this is the third and final. We'll spend a couple minutes on this because this is interesting. So in the supporting topics, we cover some economics. We don't go back and kind of cover all the basics and foundations and do a college course on econ, on engineering economics, which would be beneficial, but it might also actually be a detour and a distraction from the core topics. There's a reason why this is a supporting topic. We don't want to go too deep on it, but if in the 3 to 5 problems that I gave you in the supporting topics, you're not really sure where to start or where to go, then it does make sense to kind of step back and try to build those building blocks. But luckily, what we're being asked to do shouldn't be too hard. But let me just read this question. So do you have any videos explaining how to know which column to use from the economic factor tables? I have a really hard time understanding anything economics/business/accounting related. I don't understand how you're relating the gradients to the A, F, G, P's, and V's. I'm not sure what the V's are, but A for annualized, F for future, G for gradient, and P for present value. Yeah, so the answer is right from the reference handbook. We sort of have two ways to go about it. One is these formulas. These formulas will allow us to go between future and present, annualized, or gradient. We can jump from any one to any other one. And the only thing we really need to go from one to the other is to know where we're starting and where we need to go, and the interest rate and the number of compounding periods, which is almost always years. Could technically be months or something else that you might define, but it's almost always years for engineering economics. So if you know the interest rate and the number of years, what you want to go from and what you want to go to, like you want to go from future to present or present to future or whatever, then you can calculate for any number of compounding periods and any number of years what that economic factor should be that you would multiply by. That's the most general way to go about it, and that's the most powerful way because you can do it for any values of interest rate and years. For your convenience, they've assembled tables, and the tables are nice. They don't have tables for every interest rate though. So that's the problem, is you might have to interpolate between the values on two tables, or you may have to come back to the conversion formulas that are here. So if that's the case, then you do what you have to do. But if you do have the interest rate and the problem is from one of the things that there is a table, then you can go straight to the table, which is wonderful. So let's do an example. I just pulled a little snip of the 6% table. And stepping back a bit, because I think the fundamental building block to almost all economics problems is starting with the cash flow diagram, understanding what you're going from and what you're going to. And there's 4 flavors that this comes in: present value, annualized value, future value, and gradient. And if V means something else, then please tell me, but those are the 4 that I'm aware of. So if I were to just jump over here and kind of draw super simple cash flow diagrams for what pops into my brain when I see these, and it's a present value, and let's assume it's a negative value. So I'm not receiving money, I'm spending money. So if I'm spending money right now in the present, it's year 0. So this is my horizontal axis, which represents time. And in year 0 right now, I'm spending some amount of money. That's my cash flow diagram. Super simple, one time cash flow is leaving. Contrast that with a future value, which means I have to define that point in the future, like how long from now is it? Here's now, here's the future. So let's say this is year 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm spending money in year 4 instead of in year 0. So that's a future value. And then the annualized value means I'm sprinkling it over time. So here's year 0, here's year 4, and I'm doing a little bit. Well, actually, in that case, I wouldn't be doing any in year 0, but starting in year 1, I'm going to have a negative cash flow. In year 2, in year 3, in year 4. And I'm just using 4 as an example. There's nothing magical about that number. And then the gradient is kind of interesting. It starts at 1, it starts at year 1, but it doesn't have any magnitude in year 1. So in year 0 and year 1, by convention, there's no cash flow, but it's starting in year 2, it increases. So the biggest, and then it sort of forms this triangle. If I drew that, I drew that pretty badly, but make this one a little bigger. So that's the concept of a gradient. And you need one more value for the gradient. You don't just need the years and the interest rate. You need to know how much it's ratcheting up by each year. So maybe this is 0 and then $10, and then 10 plus 10 is 20, and 20 plus 10 is 30, and so on. That's the basic idea of the 4 types of cash flows that you can have. And then the name of the game becomes drawing these cash flow diagrams as they become increasingly complex because there's more stuff going on. There could be present value and future value and annualized value and gradients all on the same diagram. And that's unwieldy, right? Like, how do we deal with all that? So one way of dealing with that is to get them all into the same flavor. So maybe I want to bring everything into a present value, Or maybe I want to bring everything into an annualized value. We also have the possibility that things could be going in other directions. Maybe there's revenue streams, money coming in, and expenses, money going out. And we want to deal with the net effect of those. So how you go about combining all of that really comes down to the specifics of the problem. But these are the building blocks. Keep in mind that before you superimpose all of this onto one unwieldy cash flow diagram, you can decompose it into its constituent pieces and draw simple diagrams like the ones we have here if it's easier to understand, and then compile them. You'll see in a lot of my solution videos, I go right to drawing one diagram. But if that just seems like a bit too much for you, draw the individual pieces and then look at all the pieces and say, okay, let's now go ahead and try to assemble this onto one and try to roadmap our way to a solution. But let's just do one quick example because your question asked, like, I don't understand how you're relating these things together. So let's do a super simple example of a future value and a present value. So let's say I offered you an option. Option one is I'll give you $100 right now, or I'll give you $106 next year. Which one do you take? And when you were in engineering school a long time ago, they taught this as the concept of the time value of money. The way you should think about this is if you have an idea for how you can invest the money that you know can make 6%, let's ignore risk, volatility, uncertainty. You're very confident that you can earn a return of 6% in 1 year on the $100. Then you should be utterly neutral about these two options. You'll take either one because it's the same to you. But if the best idea you have, the best investment idea you can come up with is only going to make 3%, then you should take the 106 next year. You'll do better. Alternatively, if you have an idea that can earn 10%, then you should take the $100 now and go ahead and invest it on your own terms. You know what you're doing and you can beat that 6%. So that's kind of the intuition around time value of money. But now how do we put that into practice using these tables? Well, we can write out the formula. We can say, what would be the corresponding future value for a present value at some interest rate and some number of compounding periods? So let's use the example we just did. Let's say the present value was going to be $100, and we want to multiply that by the cash flow factor that is F given P, and that's the language that you use when you define these factors. You say F given P or P given F, or whatever you want to go to is the numerator, whatever you're coming from is the denominator. And you can imagine multiplying it like it's fractions. So if P is in the denominator, then P and P would cancel. That's not actually what's happening, but it's just a helpful convention to remember. And then you're left with F, which is the future value, and that's what you want to get out. Take the principal value, the present value, which is 100, times the cash flow factor F given P at some interest rate. Let's use 6% as the interest rate, since that's the table we grabbed. And the number of years would just be one compounding period. So what do we think that's going to be in the table? Surprise, surprise. F given P for 1 year in 6% table is 1.06. So $100 times 1.06 is $106. And voila, we have proven that $100 today is worth $106 in the future if the interest rate is 6%. If the interest rate is something else, it's going to be different. Now, that was an easy one. Obviously, you could increase the number of compounding periods. You could say, what would that be in 5 years or 10 years? And you would just slide down the table to the cash flow factor. How long does it take for the money to double? About 12 years. So that's good to know that you can quickly get that answer at different interest rates. And then what else can we say about that? Well, we could go into annualized. We could go into, so that's just going from a single cash flow, present value to future value. We could go from that present value to an annualized value. And we could do the same with the gradient. That's probably the hardest one to deal with because it gets a little tricky. But once you've done it once, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. So my general advice is draw the cash flow diagrams, take your time, and don't worry about having to bring some prior knowledge or expertise to this process before doing it. Just get messy, get in there, learn it by doing it. And if by the end of doing these handful of problems, you can do that handful of problems, chances are you've developed the skills that you'll need to handle 90 to 95% of any economics problems that you would see on the PE exam. And if as you're doing that, you encounter something specific that's just troubling, then let me know and we'll deal with it, in specific detail.